we got another classic guitar to show you guys today. Pete, what are we looking at today?
Okay, what we're looking at is a 1979 Charvel boogie-necked Eddie Van Halen copy that was one of the first copies that Charvel ever made of Eddie's guitar. And this was originally purchased by Dokken from Charvel. And what some people would like to know too is when we look at San Dimas Charvels, this is actually an Azusa Charvel. This is pre-San Dimas. And the reason why this guitar would have a boogie body's neck, which is what Ed's guitars were made out of back then, is because this is before Charvel even made a neck. They were only doing bodies. They'd yet to make their own necks. So, yeah, so this is an old one. This isn't a reissue. This isn't anything done by Fender. This is the real deal, and they're unicorns.
Let's set it over on the bench over here so we can get a good look at it. This video is brought to you by Swiss Picks. It's not just a pick, it's a science. Available at ZIMM'S Guitars or at www.swisspicks.com.
Okay, so the fun thing about this guitar is Don Dokken purchased it from Charvel in '79, went to the shop, loved the guitar, he buys it for $400, and soon after he realizes that this is Eddie Van Halen's new design. So Don Dokken, there was a guitar player in Don's band named Greg Derschlag, and Don sold it to Greg because Don, told Greg that, wow, I can't go on stage with this. This is Eddie's new design. I'm going to get roused. So Greg buys it for $400 and sits on it for 28 years and plays the guitar. Greg ended up joining a band called the Weasels. So while Greg was in the Weasels, Ed was at the Whiskey A Go-Go.
And this was, what year was that?
Christmas Eve, '79.
1979. Ed's at the Whiskey, watching the Weasels.
Watching the Weasels, and sees Greg on stage with this guitar, and he is pissed. So pissed that in an interview in Guitar Player magazine, he actually talks about Greg being on stage with his guitar, with his design, with one humbucker, one knob, the stripe paint job, and, just being upset the fact that people are, that Grover Jackson is making money off of his design. Because Ed put the kibitz on Grover, and this is one of the guitars that got Ed into the big fight with Grover Jackson of Charvel guitars at that time. So even any guitars that Ed had that had any kind of Charvel logo, you would see Ed, you'd see the Charvel logo covered with tape, later on. And one kind of fun thing about this guitar too is you're going to notice that it has a Floyd Rose nut on it, but there's no Floyd Rose on it. So going back into the history of what happened with Floyd Rose, they were originally non-fine tuners on the Floyd Roses. They hadn't done the fine tuners.
The first ones, yeah, you didn't have the fine tuners on there yet.
So a lot of people thought that, well, we could just do a lock nut on a standard, tremolo, and it'll work, which it really kind of didn't. Although there are some people who know exactly where to set the strings, so when you tighten the lock nut, it pulls it forward enough to just about have it in tune. I can't do that. But, so yeah, so we have a lock nut with a standard trem, which is a kind of fun about the tremolo. You'll see like these early trems had the keyhole saddles. And yeah, and they have a brass block underneath, which we'll look at later. And yeah, so that's some of the cool stuff here.
So we're going to restring this guitar today?
Yeah, we're gonna do a little taking it apart, and I'm gonna show people under the hood. I'm gonna show them under the trem cavity, and all the kind of stuff that Charvel did before they were even in San Dimas.
All right, let's get started.
There's a lot of cool stuff that you guys are gonna look at here.
All right, here we go. So the back plate, everything has been with the guitar its entire life, huh?
Yeah, and these are they're very heavy. They're actually brass. They're usually chrome plated brass. Then, because they use a lot of brass parts. You can see here we have the brass block in there. There you go. You got the brass block, which is turning green from age. What's really kind of cool too is if you look over here under the springs, you can see little cavities in there. And that's something on very early Charvels and Azusa Charvels that they did. They had this open little cavity in there. Which is
Explain this Azusa thing.
All right, so Azusa. A lot of people know Charvel as a San Dimas, San Dimas Charvels. But before San Dimas, they were in Azusa, California.
Okay.
And then they moved to San Dimas, I think, in 1980.
All right, so this guitar has the whole pickguard over the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get under here and we'll see, because we know that the Eddie, the Frankenstrat and everything, he just used the little vinyl pickguard and just this section of it, and he got rid of all the rest of that.
He just cut a little part of the pickguard, and that's what he used, and just kind of funny. And you know, even back then, because they weren't really doing the one hum guitars. Most of the guitars back then, had the the front route. So it was kind of rare to see stuff that was just when they had the rear cover underneath, like Charvel went to later on. And get ready, we're gonna see some cool stuff under here.
Okay.
So this guard hasn't been off in a long time, but let's not break those wires, and here we go. Okay, so what we're looking at, what's kind of cool is, this is the original Azusa route, which is an oval route. You know what I'm saying, how they have the oval route here? And it's almost like a little kidney bean type of design in here. It was really kind of rough, because you see even like, the lines here, aren't exactly so super straight. But this is originally what they did back in '79. What's kind of cool too is there is a preamp under here that is not hooked up, but the guitar came with an original preamp, maybe by, I think Mighty might have done those. And the pickup in this guitar too, I mean, like I said, a lot of stuff in here is kind of raw. The pickup has no markings on it, but it is a Dokken custom red label that the label fell off of that I have at home. So yeah, so under the hood, and you can see, like I said, so the guitar, was just a one hum always. No routes for anything else. And a lot of you at home could see too is how the lines here, they're pretty raw. Like there's bleed lines and stuff like that in this. And this is the beginnings of these are the first graphics that Charvel ever tried. The first, paint jobs that they did that weren't, just straight colors. So, it took them a bit to get up to speed on it and to get pretty talented with it. But yeah, so this guard has not been off in probably about 14 years. We have a very heavily corroded pot there, and and you can see right here where the Seymour Duncan, the red label fell off of that. A little more chrome under there. And
a lot going on that potentiometer right there.
Yeah, a lot going on. Yeah, I mean, I think is the potentiometer original? I don't know. I don't know if Greg had put something else in there, and through the years, because he did use this guitar quite a bit in the 28 years he had it.
I'd be so tempted to cut a little pickguard if it was me.
I know, right?
And not leave it original.
Yeah, no, then you have the pickguard screws and stuff here.
I know, right?
But it's just it's pretty cool looking under there.
Yeah, I'd be so tempted if it was mine to just make a Frankenstrat out of it.
And one thing that's interesting too, even on the paint job, is that you'll see like this little star pattern. That star pattern pops up on some of the really old, black and yellow copies that Charvel was doing.
Let's look at that magazine you brought in for a second, that front.
Okay, so going back to the story about the Weasels and Greg owning this guitar. So this is a flyer I got with the guitar, and it's of the Weasels. It's a really nice flyer, considering it's probably from
1977.
1970, yeah, that's right when the guy drew it. And the Weasels, Greg got into the Weasels after he left Don Dokken's band, which is pre-Dokken that you guys know. And here's a Weasels pin, right, that came with it. And so originally what happened is when I had this guitar for years, and then I'm sitting on the toilet reading, because that's where men read. We read on a toilet. So of course, being a fan, I'm reading this magazine here, which is Van Halen, the unpublished interviews. And, Jas Obrecht from Guitar Player said, back in the day, they would riff for hours, him and Eddie. So, they put out a special magazine saying, here's the interviews completely unedited from the magazine. So, much to my surprise, I'm hanging out there reading. And Ed here says, I was at the Whiskey the other night on Christmas Eve. And this interview is from April 1980.
Okay.
So he says a band called the Weasels. If you look up here, the band called the Weasels was playing, and the lead guitarist
I see that. Yeah.
had a guitar exactly like mine. I just don't understand how someone could go walk on stage with my guitar because it is my trademark. You know, when people see a freaked out striped guitar like that with one pickup, one volume knob, they obviously know it's mine. So Ed goes on here and talks about, you know, Grover Jackson and Seymour Duncan, which essentially, what's funny is the guitar is a Seymour Duncan custom pickup, which was supposedly made for Ed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then Seymour tried to market that as Ed's pickup. So yeah, so it's funny that in Christmas '79, Eddie Van Halen saw this guitar on stage being played by Greg and the Weasels, and it pissed him off.
It didn't make Eddie very happy.
No, it pissed him off.
They're still in his whole mantra.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like it's.
And now on the cover here, you're showing Ed playing a Stripe series.
Yeah.
This guitar is, what's the story on this guitar that's actually on that cover?
This is originally Ed's black and yellow with the Boogie Body's neck and it's probably a Boogie Body's body, I think, where he got the stuff from. It's hard to tell because, you know.
Same company build?
Sort of, yeah. The same company, Boogie, did the neck. And Charvel made the body.
Charvel wasn't making necks yet.
No, they were yet to make a neck.
So they were getting their stuff from Boogie.
Yeah.
Boogie Bodies. Okay.
And it was funny back then because in Southern not that I was around back then, but in Southern California, as the stories go, you know, Boogie Bodies, which is Lynn Ellsworth, and he had sold Eddie parts, necks, bodies. Mighty Might, Ken Warmoth from Warmoth Guitars.
Warmoth was around?
Warmoth was around, and an early version of them, and Wayne Charvel, you know. So these guys were old buddies, and they shared parts. Schecter, too. Schecter was another company, you know, I think it was Dave Schecter, I believe it was Dave or Dan, I think it was Dave Schecter. You know, these guys all were helping each other out because they were all trying to do this hot rod guitar thing and go into business together. But in 1978, Wayne Charvel sold the company to Grover Jackson. So it's funny that with, you know, the name Charvel, that Wayne Charvel didn't even really have much to do with Charvel in a lot of ways. Because really Grover Jackson was in there in 1978, and then Mike Shannon, who's the the master Charvel Jackson luthier, the legend Mike Shannon, he started there in right after high school in the fall of 1978. So yeah, and basically this guitar too, pictures of this guitar did go to Mike Shannon. They went to Tim Wilson of Charvel, and they authenticated the guitar as much as in the collector circles. There's a guy who knows probably more about this stuff than anybody, and his name is Jim Shine, and Jim Shine just said, yeah, oh my God, that's an original Azusa. You know, he said that is a Grail. He said that is a unicorn, and he was just honored to see it.
Wow.
Which is super cool because, you know, even growing up and being a Charvel collector myself, we had heard about the Azusa Charvels, you know, with the boogie necks. We had heard the legend, but no one had ever really seen one, and nor did I until I got this in 2008. And yeah, and I've been playing it ever since.
That's cool. So you're gonna put some strings on it?
Yeah, we're gonna oil the board, keep that board oiled, and put some strings on it, and then we'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
All right, so what we've done for you guys is we've pulled the neck, and this is in the early days of when Charvel, they started putting a little black magic marker, you know, around there so you wouldn't see the body wood next to the neck. And in this cavity here, if you look, there is a pencil number 3. Can you catch that in there? There you go, number 3. So yeah, so we have number 3, and these are
3 out of 5
or 6.
3 out of 6.
3 out of 6. So, you know, the story is when Ed came into so here's how Ed got into the big fight with Grover Jackson. Here's how Charvel copied Ed's guitar. So Ed brings the original black and yellow into Charvel just to route a humbucker in the day. Because Ed realized after the first one, as we've seen, he couldn't route a humbucker with the chisel.
The Frankie is really messy.
He did that with a chisel. So he comes. As the story goes from the guys at Charvel, Ed comes back, you know, around 2 weeks later, and there's 6 black and yellows drying on the paint rack. And he goes berserk.
He's pissed off.
He's pissed. He goes berserk on Grover Jackson. He threatens to sue him, tells him, you can't do that. Grover says, you can't trademark or you can't copyright a paint job. And eventually Grover stopped, although they did leak black and yellows from time to time at Charvel. You know, someone's going to pay for it.
And this is number 3 out of those 6.
And this could be number 3 out of the 6. And you'll even see what's kind of fun down here.
Could be or is.
It is. I mean, it is one of the earliest ones. And then, so the necks on these are actually made by Boogie Bodies. And Boogie bodies would be in script along here. You could just kind of see the outline of their logo, and this is neck number 1108, or body part 1108.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of cool too. It's all bird's eye, which is beautiful. Boogie stuff was just phenomenal stuff back in the day, which is why Ed was using them.
And what are these tuners?
These are just straight up Strat tuners. You know, back then, Clues and Deluxes, and you know, this is you know, it's funny too because with the pre-pro tuners that they had, the Godos, I don't know when they started making those. Another cool thing about these necks is you can see they have, if we come in close, is the brass side markers. Mm-hmm. So if you see these brass markers,
instead of white plastic or a clay dot or something,
they use brass, which is really neat. One thing about this neck too. So when I got this guitar, the frets were really worn because Greg played this guitar a lot. So this was refretted with 6150 frets by John Carruthers, who is one of the famous California luthiers in Los Angeles. And this is when he was at his Venice store, and or his Venice shop, and he just knocked this thing out of the park. I just told him, I said, John, I need you to do your best work on this. Another cool thing too, ebony board on this neck, which everyone loves ebony, pearl dots. And you can notice even here from Charvel on the boogie necks, the 12 fret dots are close together.
I see that.
Close together. So this is the neck, and we're going to put this guy back together in a minute now.
Okay. All right. So again, this guitar belonged to Don Dokken a long time ago, and you got a pretty good story about that, huh?
Oh yeah. So you know, Don walked us out of Charvel in 1979. Soon after, sold it to his guitar player Greg, and I bought it from Greg back in 2008. So in 2011, my phone rings and it's Greg, and he asks me, he goes, "Hey, you know, Pete, do you still have the black and yellow, you know, Van Halen guitar I sold you?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I got it, Greg. Play it all the time. I love it." He goes, "Okay, listen." He goes, "Don Dokken called me. He wants the guitar back, and he wants your information." And I'm like, "No, don't tell him anything. You know, fuck that guy. No, don't give it to him." So he's like, "Oh, okay. You know." So then maybe a few months after, my luthier in Los Angeles was Jim Foote. You know, Jim Foote's famous. He did work for everyone from Guns N' Roses to Dokken to Great White, you know, almost like the who's who of LA. He did fret work for and guitar repairs. So I walk into Jim Foote's shop one day and he goes, "Hey, weirdest thing." He goes, "Don Dokken was in here looking for you and he wants your information." I said, "Did you give him any?" He goes, No. He goes, "What's going on?" I said, "I got this guitar he bought in '79 and he wants it back." You know, and you know, Jim laughed, and you know, we just had a good laugh over it. But so Don was actually trying to you know, I guess, you know, get my information just to try and get the guitar back out of me in the, you know, 2011, you know, 2012 range. And luckily I haven't heard anything since, and I've moved out of LA in 2017.
So now once this video comes out, now Don's going to be calling me at the store here, and I'm going to just say, "I'm sorry, Don. Don't call me about this one, okay?"
I say, "Don, you just got unlucky."
I love your music, Don. I'm a huge fan. But no, I'm not going to give you his info.
Say, "Don, it was 42 years ago. Get over it."
let me ask you about, okay, now on this pickup.
Yeah.
I'm going to get back to the guitar for a second. You can see how the pole pieces don't really line up with, so this is a
F-spaced, yeah.
F-spaced pickup.
And F-space didn't come out until maybe the 90s, right? They got into the F-spacing, but yeah, you know, and you know, they always had the ad of I forget who did the original F-space. I think it might have been I don't know who did it, but they said get your E strings back, you know, because the strings never exactly went over the pole pieces on a standard spaced humbucker,
right?
You know,
and this is what inspired Eddie
to turn it,
to tilt it.
Yeah. He did the little sideways thing, and it, you know, gave him a little more sound on the E's.
A little more volume there.
Yeah. So some pretty cool stuff, and that's where, you know, guitar evolves. You know, the builds evolve, and you know, things happen to where they, you know, they learn as they go. You know, but this in 1979 was so early, and one kind of cool thing you'll see here, like with the early ones, was the square jack plate.
That's a nice touch.
Yeah, it's square jack plates, and like I said, you know, they use a lot of metal and brass parts on the guitars, and you know, one of the metal knobs, and Yeah, and if you look too, there's a lot of paint checking on this.
Yeah,
It's
it
kind of hard
looks
to
really
tell.
neat. It looks really
A
neat.
lot of paint checking, and some of the other cool parts too is when you look at even the lines here. They just, when they taped it off, they just really didn't do a great job. If you get right up, you could see even like little bleed marks and stuff from what they were trying to do, or spots where they just completely they just missed. One kind of cool part here we're going to show you is that in the neck right here is how they kind of finished it over here. It was really kind of not too crafty looking.
Just how it happened.
Just how it happened, and yeah. So so this is it. This is what some people call the unicorn, or
And okay, one more thing. The wood is what's this wood right here?
Oh, this is Northern Ash.
Northern Ash. This guitar. What's this guitar weighing at?
It's got to be between 12 and 13.
It's a great piece of history. It is so cool that it actually played at the Whiskey A Go Go, because I love that bar. And everything about Eddie Van Halen I love, and even Don Dokken. Everything about Don Dokken and his band I love. It's just a treat to be able to play this thing for a second. Some guys have all the luck. There it is, guys. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so here we go. We're going to put her away in the original Charvel red-lined case.
Never to be seen ever again.
Oh, yeah. Well, not here, but it will be seen again.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you, guys.